Welcome back to Neurodiverse Christian Couples. I'm Stephanie.
I'm Dan.
And we're going to do another one. We're going to try to keep the video rolling, see what happens. So there might be some things that might not translate to the audio podcast. So you'll have to go to our YouTube. Dr. Stephanie.
The whole thing is going to be on the internet, YouTube?
Yeah. So pay attention. Sometimes Dan's on his phone, scrolling along.
Well, I have to look things up.
I know.
I get curious.
Okay. So for the whole video, things that you might not understand in the audio part, our YouTube is Dr. Stephanie C. Holmes, and you'll find some videos there, not only videos that we have done together, but also of some of our guests. So,
and my YouTube has an ant fight.
Yes, Dan's YouTube has all interesting things about our dog, barking at things, and ants. So, yeah, two different reasons for our YouTubes. Okay, so we are going to cover some concepts in two books. We hope to have on, we were scheduled to do this interview and it got canceled and delayed, but we're hoping to still have it, is Gottman trained individual who is also neurodiverse trained. And so
who's Gottman?
Gottman, that's a great question. So Gottman Institute for Relationships is one of the evidence-based and kind of gold standard of counselor and clinician training. The Gottmans kind of dedicate their research to helping couples. What are things that help couples? What are communication strategies that hurt couples? And wrote this book based on their research, why marriages succeed or fail, and how you can make yours last. So the first thing about the Gottman training is it is not necessarily, it is not Christian. They are not Christians. However, the things that they talk about are definitely biblically based, the foundations of safety and trust and building relationship. I find it interesting, even though neither of them are Christians. The book begins with Ecclesiastes 1, 9, and 12. Fellow, but woe alone when he falls, for he has not another to help him up. And if two lie together when they have warmth, but how can one be warm alone? And if one prevail against him, two shall withstand him. So while again, they are not Christians, this was one of the first books I was given in Christian counseling during my training. Even in my Christian counseling program, they said, you should read this book. It's got a lot of great stuff. Does that help? Now we know who Gottman is?
Now we do.
All right. So the person we want to have on is a Gottman trained. Gottman is a type of training clinicians, coaches, counselors can get. And again, it's considered kind of gold standard. It's evidence-based. It's not just like some of our Christian self-help books are just one person's opinion, one person's little revelation from God that they put down in a book, or something they saw in their practice, maybe with two couples, and they wrote a book about it. Or maybe it's their own personal life story. So we are about kind of talking about evidence-based stuff. So we're going to talk about Gottman, and we're also going to talk about intimacy and connection. We had a question come in. We sent out an email that said, got questions? And one of our questions was, can you talk more about connection and intimacy? Are those the same? Are they different? And the person who sent the question was actually someone who's on the spectrum. He was confused because he says, my wife always says we have no connection, but I feel we are connected. But she is constantly saying that we are not. So we thought we would answer that question or talk a little bit about that. So where do you want to start in that?
I thought you were going to start.
Oh, I'm starting. Okay, there we go. All right. I thought, never know. Sometimes something's just brewing over there and he wants to start the conversation. Okay, I'm going to start us off. This book is called Intimacy, and it is by June Hunt. She has a lot of wonderful keys and tools at Hope for the Heart Ministries. This is very biblically based. So let's just start with what is intimacy. It is a close, trusting relationship between two people who both feel secure enough to share their innermost thoughts and feelings. If you want to know where it comes from, it's from the Latin word intimus, which means innermost. Intimacy is shared personal knowledge that's marked by long-term close contact. It is attained through self-disclosure, being emotionally honest and vulnerable with someone.
Can we stop right there?
Sure.
So what do you think is the difference between what you might consider an innermost thought and feeling, and what I might consider an innermost thought or feeling.
Well, I know how I'm going to answer that question. I am more interested in how you would answer that question. Because you're just going to copy my answer. Okay, I think the difference is maybe I think you're studying Exodus right now, and you're also studying Hebrew, and you're kind of studying scripture through the eyes through the Hebrew or the Eastern approach versus our Western approach of Christianity. Okay. So I think for you, if you have pondered something, cogitated, come to some new conclusion, and you want to share that with me because you are excited about something you have found out or discovered, and you want to share that with me, that might be an innermost thought for you.
Might be, yes.
Okay. What else?
What else? What?
I think that's the most common.
Yes, I would agree.
All right. So then sometimes though, like we're currently writing a family book, and it's going to have my perspective and Dan's perspective. Sometimes I get your innermost thoughts and feelings in your journaling or your reflection on something, like an email I found 10 years after a conflict that we had that you processed and said, now that I'm reflecting on this is what I was feeling. I maybe was stuck in shame and I had a hard time talking about this with you. That does happen, but I feel like I get the emotional ones maybe through an email, a text, or a journal before we actually discuss it.
So of those two things, because I have a feeling your innermost feelings, let's playing pretend, you have those same two, but from a priority perspective, they're reversed.
Correct.
So it would seem reasonable then. Your connection should be bidirectional and should be at the same level.
Yes.
So if so my point is, I think, if our connections are not on parallel paths of deepness from the other person's perspective, I could think that we are connecting really well because we are having a good discussion on Exodus, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not ringing connection for you.
Correct. So
did we finish?
No, you're bringing up a very good point. I will bring us to, if I can find it in her book. What you're talking about is intellectual intimacy. And so give me a moment to find it in the June Hunt book, and I will quote her and give her all of the props. Okay, so she outlines there are 6 different levels of intimacy. So what you just talked about is intellectual intimacy, exchanging thoughts and ideas about what you truly believe, sharing what you're passionate about or what you care about, discussing what has happened in your day, discussing your health, work, politics, finances, sharing thoughts about your specific interest, sharing thoughts about new skills that you've acquired, shared knowledge, or when you have been teaching, mentoring, or coaching others and sharing that intellectually. So that is a form of intimacy. She has that as kind of level 1 in her 6 types. So it is important for couples and people to discuss things deeply that they care about and that they're concerned about in their day-to-day life. And so that might tick all your boxes for connection that
So
day.
when you say level 1, what does that mean?
So she feels like they build on each other. I'll run through the 6. She calls the first one intellectual intimacy. Number 2, social intimacy. Number 3, emotional intimacy. Number 4, spiritual intimacy. Number 5, non-sexual physical intimacy. And 6 is sexual intimacy.
So do you think that, so I haven't read that book. So do you think that is a natural and the only progression?
I certainly think they build on each other. Well, I'll say for women, it builds on each other. So maybe for a lot of men listening, level 1 and level 6 is maybe all you want or need. We have an intellectual intimacy, maybe some spiritual intimacy, but we'll define that. That's not just going to church or a small group together. Like intellectual, spiritual, sexual, check, check, check. That's all good. As long as I got those 3, it's all good for me. And so maybe that person feels the couple is connected, but definitely a neurotypical is going to want social intimacy, emotional intimacy, and also the non-sexual physical intimacy to lead to sexual intimacy.
Because what I'm brewing is, so you remember that book about love languages?
Right.
And we have a different love language. And the whole point of that book was, I know your love language, so I communicate or satisfy in that vein.
Right.
What if you applied the same idea to those 6, and instead of stacking them on top of each other and creating some kind of gradient that this is now the most mega, it's just an order of preference. And when I'm talking to you, I go, if I want to hit your intimacy requirements, I'd find however you ranked them, like emotional and social, and then spiritual, whatever your ranking is. And then the opposite direction, whatever my ranking would be, similar in the vein of how the love languages work.
All right. So,
and I don't know if that's in the book or not. I'm just suggesting that's a possible way to view it. If you can't figure out, if one of you thinks you're intimacy satisfied and the other is saying, no, that's not true.
Well, I like that concept of each person discussing what the levels of intimacy mean to them. Now, she does rank them in to get to the next level. One should be satisfied and moving to the next level. So she does see it as the word gradient. Is that right? She does see them going into each other. That, maybe being that she's a female writer and a female counselor, maybe these 6 mean more to a woman or a neurotypical spouse than to the autistic or neurodiverse spouse, because maybe you don't need some of those levels to be sexual or physical. The audience of that book was not probably me. Correct. But so let's talk about that. So let's go through these different levels, and then we'll kind of talk about, we'll just rank yours and I'll rank mine, and we'll kind of see. So we already talked about intellectual intimacy. That's like the Exodus and all that you're learning in Hebrew, which I enjoy learning that stuff. I've got nerd tendencies, so I enjoy it, and I enjoy that you enjoy it, and I like that you're learning something, and I have fun in those discussions. It's certainly better than sometimes talking about all the problem things that we are discussing. So it's a nice break, but it's not always connecting for me. But it's fun and it's good and it's joy building, but it might not be connecting.
Doesn't fill the bucket.
It doesn't fill the bucket all the way, but it might fill your bucket more than mine.
That's the name of the mascot in Home Depot race. Fill the bucket.
Fill the bucket. Okay. All right. So Braves reference. Okay. Number 2, social intimacy. It is built by spending time and enjoying activities together. Dinner, having coffee, theater, sporting events, taking a walk in the park, expanding your interest by increasing what you learn and are willing to share with the other, celebrating holidays with family and friends, sharing events of your life with others, birthdays, graduations, weddings, anniversaries, death, funerals, assisting those in need, volunteering, ministering, serving others together. So like one way we do that is we serve through cross-cultural ministries. We do the backpacks. We do ministry with the Christmas gifts. If someone's house burned down, we're collecting stuff for whoever that is. So that's one form. Small groups, our Zoom groups, right. Group coaching. So for those things, do those build intimacy for you? Like spending time and doing things on the activities with a lot of people or small groups or big Thanksgiving gatherings, are those as intimacy and connection building for you, or do some of those create stress for you?
I think for me, just a common every night dinner.
So it's more smaller knit, you and me having dinner, right. Or our girls.
Or yes, family. Just the
more close knit.
Yeah.
Okay.
immediate family, special occasions with extended family.
Okay, so that might be enough to tick your bucket, or tick your bucket, fill the bucket, tick the box, mix my metaphors. But for me, I might sometimes also want to do other things with friends or have people over or have small groups at our house. And so I'm going to need a little bit more to fill that bucket for me.
Right.
It's not wrong that you don't need as much. Maybe your bucket is 1 quart, but mine's a gallon.
Or maybe I just put a different kind of liquid in my bucket and they're the same size.
Okay, we won't go there. All right, number 3. Don't start math and science in my brain. Emotional intimacy, laughing together, experiencing joy together, accepting others as they are. This doesn't mean that you never disapprove of their actions or disagree with them. Boy, is that important. Sharing your deepest feelings, even when they are difficult or painful, expressing empathy and compassion and understanding, working through conflict without abandoning the relationship or causing more harm. All right. So an emotional intimacy, what ticks that box for you? Like, what's enough for your emotional intimacy bucket box?
To a certain degree, most all of those. Certainly, if we're in I can't think of an example, but sharing, I'll reduce the first bullet there from laughing together to sharing a common emotion.
Okay.
Whatever that is. Right. So for instance, we certainly haven't done this in an extremely long time, but a comedy club.
Well, there's a reason. It's gotta be clean. It wasn't one of the most, and it certainly was not an exciting moment, but there was an interesting intimacy that night at the hospital when we were all there with your dad. That was a very revelatory experience. That common, that unity of emotion, everybody experiencing something in their own way, but it was the same thing. It was a unity, but not certainly wasn't fun.
No, it wasn't
awful,
fun. But it was unique to everybody, but it was a common experience. And that was a shared intimacy that I didn't understand till the other side of that, how that could be true.
So the important part, you've heard us talk a lot, listeners, about Dr. Wilder and joy building, and that is extremely important in the Hesed. But also part of Hesed, or I'm there for you, is being there for you in pain and conflict and hard things. And she talks about working through conflict and pain without abandoning the relationship. So if there's a hard thing and Dan has processed it in 5 minutes and he's like ready to move on, and I'm still in the moment or in the pain, that's going to feel like an abandonment of the relationship and an abandonment of the moment to me. And just because you're a faster processor of emotions doesn't mean I'm weaker, because I need more time to process it.
Right.
So I would kind of flip that then for the neurodivergent people listening. If you have processed through those emotions, then what is the barrier to them being there for the other person's emotions? Like, if you're through it and you're done with it, why not hear the difficulty or the pain that the other person's in? So emotional intimacy is sharing, it's joy, it's pain, and kind of back to that hospital moment, it was the inner people of the family. It was the kids and grandkids. Right. It was being with someone as they're transitioning, to the next chapter of their life, and all crying and sharing and comforting each other too. So comfort is huge and emotional. I mean, growing and laughing and joy and fun, that's great, but I think that's a little shallow if that's all you do. There's going to have to be getting through pain and conflict and difficult emotions to really deepen emotional connection.
And let's demystify that word comfort. It's not like we were patting each other on the head saying, now they're there, everything. It's
Cobra honey.
right. It was just a silent existence in more than 90% of the time.
Being there in the discomfort and the weight of it, all knowing what's happening, knowing the support's getting ready to be turned off,
Right.
saying your last things, going through pictures together, reliving positive moments together. It was kind of like in that, I guess the Disney movie was it Inside Out, that sometimes it's the joy and the sadness and the pain that are sometimes mixed in those memories, but it's more about being together and not feeling abandoned or left alone to handle those. All right. Number 4 is spiritual intimacy. And this is way more than just book knowledge. So like the things you're studying about Exodus is pretty heady and pretty intellectual, but is it really strengthening your spiritual relationship with God? Like, is it drawing you closer to God in a more intimate way of knowing him? It's increasing your relationship with him. Like, so how do you take the really deep book knowledge, and how do you define that from a spiritual intimacy? You go way deeper than I do.
So this is a challenging one because I think everybody experiences God different.
Right.
Right. Your relationship with God and how he interacts with you is certainly different than mine. So that while I can answer the question, I'm not sure how useful it is to the general, but for instance, in that particular case, just like in Romans 1, I believe, I think it's Romans 1, all creation declares the glory of God. If you take that from an observational perspective and you learn something new about creation, be it biological or chemical or astrophysics or pick your thing. The intricacy and the nature of creation is a greater appreciation for what God made and therefore him. So it's a similar thing. When you read through something and you get a nuanced insight out of something, just take the Bible in general, a single story written over 1,500 years is a remarkable story when you consider watching something like a series TV program has a team of writers sitting in the same room, writing season over season with the goal of not to create story gaps. And it doesn't take a whole lot of time to surf the internet and find out where there's incongruencies in the story. Right. And that's just a team of writers sitting right there in the room doing their best to create a storyline that's going to last a handful of years and isn't going to be self-conflictual. And then you read through something as with the diversity of authorship, time, culture, and geography as the Bible and realize how just holistically coherent it is. That by itself is a remarkable feat. So, all of that generates an appreciation for God that leads into, well, if something that vast and that great can be accomplished without any real one person guiding that project, right? There was no one person over 1,500 years guiding the creation of the Bible and the stories therein. Then how much, that just shows you a real example of something you can hold in your hand of this is the God I serve and his ability to direct human behavior into a place that now 4,500 years later.
So a lot of that is still left brain logic. How does that flip to Wilder's right brain relational?
That is appreciation.
Okay.
Right. That's appreciation. And that's where it leads to, because appreciation leads to Hesed, because appreciation is remembering something that was joyful. Right. And that leads you to a joy moment. And then joy moments lead you to, well, I'm going to continue to return to what I know is joy. I'm going to not only appreciate, but engage in what Hesed is, right? And in English, you could translate that as loyal love or loving kindness or an unfailing love, right? I think that's usually the general translations of that phrase. And it kind of moves you from I appreciate, I acknowledge, I see, I remember to, well, if all of those things are true, there's an attractiveness to it. There is what's the word I want? Dr. Gill stuff. Attachment.
So, all right. So that's your relationship with God, but to bridge that to spiritual intimacy with me, right? So you've got your relationship with God. I got my relationship with God, and God speaks to you differently, maybe more through logic and intellect and story and geography. And to me, it's just a different experience. All right. So now we're going to talk about spiritual intimacy together. So her examples are spending quality time reading God's word and reflecting on what is God revealing to you about himself or revealing to you, maybe for healthy correction or group identity, in Wilder's words, acknowledging what the Lord means to you, admitting personal struggles in your life, being vulnerable one to another, singing, playing, listening to inspirational worship music together, learning about your spiritual gifts, using your spiritual gifts, encouraging each other to use their spiritual gifts, serving together with your spiritual gifts, asking about specific prayer needs of others, writing them down, praying with the other person, and then circling back around and asking them how that's doing. All right. So what you describe is a difference of relationship, then how take that? How do you see us in our spiritual intimacy? What do you in our relationship?
I think it's just a sharing. Right. I mean, you'll say, hey, this is what I got out of my devotion this morning, or, whatever. And the same thing. This is what not only what I learned, but how it turned into something personal. And for me, it's a lot more rare than it is for you, but a moment of, I really think God drop me a nugget or a revelation or something like that. I think the most recent one came on the run up to Easter when we had, the church was open every day for prayer. And I can't remember the exact story right now of why I was in angst, but it was one of those moments when I just laid there and said, I don't get it. I don't know what's going on. And I probably didn't say that the day of, but
several days later, I'm sure. Got to allow for processing time.
But I mean, that for me, that's what that looks like.
I mean, for me, it's more instantaneous. Like I get it. God revealed it to me. Oh, I'm crying tears. I have a revelation and action plan. Let's go.
Right.
Sometimes I forget to share it with you before I started the action plan. So that's my weakness, is I'm so driven by the go. Like I'm already on the journey going. And it's like, oh yeah, I forgot to tell Dan. Mm-hmm. I should let him know.
He might want to come.
He might want to come on this journey.
He's back there waving at me in the rearview mirrors.
All right. So that could be a combination of two. So intellectual intimacy and spiritual intimacy. So you're reading about the Exodus you never knew, or something like that. I'm still, I'm doing a Gospels thing right now because I'm inspired by The Chosen. And I'm doing a deep dive in the Gospel of Matthew because I'm enamored with Matthew right now. And also Day by Day. And I combine those two things. And so
Day by Day is a good one.
Day by Day. Yeah, we love Day by Day by the Scazzerists. So I might share my thing and come to you and say, hey, this is what I got from my devotion today. And you might say, well, this is what I got out of the Exodus thing today. So it may go deep intellectually, but it crosses into the spiritual sharing, like, and here's the personal point. Maybe here's a healthy correction. Hold me accountable for this, or I want to grow in this area. Now,
or here's just something about me that I didn't know, so therefore you couldn't know.
Right. Because sometimes couples think the spiritual intimacy is just praying together, just sitting down. Well, we don't pray together enough, which like everyone could do better in their prayer life, I'm sure. But some people think that just going to church, having a small group and saying a couple of prayers together, that's spiritual intimacy, but it's not. Your spouse should be the person you can confess your vulnerabilities to, that you want to share your vulnerabilities to, it not be held against you, but accountable. There's a difference between holding it against and me weaponizing against Dan, something he shared with me, or hey, weren't we supposed to work on that? Right. How are we working on that?
It's the way it's the way Jim Wilder puts it, right? In his stuff.
Healthy correction.
Instead of thinking about it from a accountability perspective, which really has that rod kind of feel to it, to you're better than that.
Right.
right?
You've
Which
got
is
this.
which
I
is
believe in you.
effectively the same thing, but the phrasing is such that one is much more uplifting. It's
But I might have disappointment in
Right.
what you did and hurt.
and that doesn't change the way you feel. It changes the way you view.
Right. Right. All right. So sometimes this is confusing for couples. Non-sexual physical intimacy. Yeah. Sexual intimacy. Yeah. Bopping me on the head was not intimate. Okay. So non-sexual physical intimacy. And this is going to be tough for some of our neurodiverse couples because number one is maintaining eye contact when you're engaged in a personal conversation.
Yeah, I haven't
We
looked
know-
at you much this entire time.
What?
I haven't looked at you much
No,
this entire time.
you don't tend to do that. Touching and being touched in affirming, nurturing, non-sexual ways. Non-sexual. Okay, but not just pointing someone on the head. She gives examples. Warm handshakes, sympathetic hugs, congratulatory pats on the back, hand on the knee, holding hands, sitting close with each other. Okay, so this is physical touch that a couple does with each other, but it might not necessarily lead to sex. It's closeness and being there. It's cuddling. It's that kind of stuff. It's being affectionate with each other. A gentle touch on one's hand, not head. A casual hug, placing a reassuring hand on one's arm or shoulder, being sensitive to and respecting the physical space that the other may need. Being sensitive with not crossing boundaries related to touch that might be misunderstood, trigger memories of past abuse, or be insensitive.
So sometimes you might be able to view that as an expression of how you feel towards that person, right? It could be true that I want to sit really close to you at the same time extraordinarily mad. That's probably rare. What's probably more true is I'm inclined to sit next to you really closely because I don't generally. When there is a internal feel of that, right? It's more of an expression of than at least for me anyway, than something I'm going to generate. But the opposite could be true, right? I mean, it could be, maybe that's the first step. So I think it could be both, but for me, it's probably more of.
I'll tell you what it's not. I mean, it seems to be a little bit more problematic in the earlier of our marriage. It's not just walking up to someone and groping them or grabbing them when you come in the door.
And grabbing you on the butt.
And other places as the first sign of greeting of hello.
Hello.
That's startling. And that's more groping, not.
You didn't find that?
But no, I did not find that intimate. I found that startling and usually wanted to pop you upside the head. So that is going to be different for different people, whereas you wouldn't care if I walked up to you and grabbed you in the butt. You'd be like, hello. All right. So, and that might not be sexual, but physical touch that's okay for you. So that's where you have to have discussions about things. But this is often missing. And I don't know of too many women who can go into sexual intimacy without some kind of non-sexual physical intimacy. It's like, wait a minute, you haven't even hugged me or touched my hand all week and you want to jump in the sack on Friday or Saturday? Like, that's not going to work. So it's a give and take in that relationship. So that leads us to the final one, sexual intimacy, adhering to biblical guidelines within the sexual expression explained in scripture, which is the context of a committed marriage between a man and a woman. It is safeguarding the sexual experience through mutual faithfulness, keeping the sexual relationship between husband and wife. It is engaging in sexual touch and activity that is consensual and acceptable to the level for each partner. It's not just trying to meet one person's need. It's mutual needs. Understanding that sex is never to be demanded as proof of love, nor given in the hope of receiving love. So that's really what withholding is about. Is like, if you don't buy me a new car or if you don't take me to dinner tomorrow, no sex for you. Like, that's a withholding mindset.
Right.
But neither should a guy be like, don't tell me that you love me. Show me that you love me. That's
Right,
sex 5 times a week.
Remember that one song?
That Chili Pepper song.
No, not that one. It was Extreme.
More Than Words.
Yeah, that was Extreme.
That's Extreme?
Yes, that's
Okay, I thought that was Chili Peppers. More Than
I'm sure
Words.
Chili Peppers had something similar, but that wasn't their song.
Also, part of sexual intimacy is ensuring the sharing of hearts, mingling of souls, and part of the sexual experience. And so I think for that part, they quote Song of Songs 2:16. I know that my beloved is mine and I am his. So that's that knowing. You know me more than sexually, but you know
Right.
my emotional needs, you know what I've gone through the week, back to the old knowing where everybody laughs when Adam knew Eve. He knew her more than just sexually.
Right. And I think that's definitely a more of a fruit. I there's probably moments when you could say it wasn't a fruit. And as long as it's mutually, it's fine. But I think in general, over the last however long we've been married.
28 years.
Yep. That's what I was thinking. It's definitely a more rewarding as it becomes a expression of who we've been for the last however many days, instead of a you want to, well, not really, but I will. Right? You get that, you get the line I'm
Right.
trying to draw.
So moving from back in our early days when we believed more in duty sex, that it was my responsibility to keep you pure, we had to do it so many times or like our marriage is doomed. So as a good little submissive wife, I would do that, but now it's more mutual and
Right. It's more, I don't know. I'll say the same thing again. It's more of a fruit, I think.
right. So the sexual intimacy really is a fruit of the other parts of the relationship: the intellect, the social, the emotional, the spiritual, the non-physical.
And when all of those come together and meet at the same time, I think that makes the sexual experience that much richer. Quits being just a corporeal thing and turns into really a whole body thing, a whole human thing.
So ending this topic on intimacy, and we're going to jump into the four horsemen. She ends, hopefully we do. We talk about false intimacy. What is false intimacy? False intimacy prevents true intimacy from occurring between two people because it is based on a person's own individual and fantasy and not reality. It's not biblically based. It provides an illusion of safety and security. It is more self-centered than other-centered. And false intimacy can actually be created through duty sex. Like if you think, well, we're having sex 3 to 5 times a week, so our marriage is good, that's false intimacy. False intimacy creates barriers by its emphasis on individuality rather than encouraging the union of two different hearts, minds, and souls. True intimacy occurs when two people can be vulnerable and naked with each other, holding nothing back emotionally, spiritually, and physically. That's really the heart of true intimacy. It's based on committed love and results in both being brought closer to God. I help you grow. You help me grow. Like we're good for each other. Versus sometimes I hear from our couples, like, this relationship has made me the worst version of myself. And that's not usually a good thing.
Yes.
So I think we do have to cut this in two because I really want to spend about this much time.
On, yeah.
All right. So this is coming. You're just going to have to stay tuned the next time Dan and I get to do one together. And hopefully our Gottman guy will walk us through some of this too. But what I really want to do is take those four horsemen: criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. And I want to break that out and take the time to talk about the differences and nuances in a neurodiverse relationship. So as we are kind of winding up today, we also want to tell you about some
Do you
upcoming.
wind up or wind down?
Oh my gosh, you did that again to me. We're closing the program. Closing the program. Why can't you wrap it up? Why can't you wind down or wind up?
Because when you wind up, you get more tense.
Okay. We're going to add some things before we close the program today to share with you on kind of what's happening, what's going on. We are getting ready to launch fall groups. And so we also have added 2 different tabs to, I usually say it wrong, ChristianNeurodiverseMarriage.com. Is that it? Yeah. Okay. So on ChristianNeurodiverseMarriage.com, there's 2 new tabs. One is called referrals. Referrals are for people that have gone through our specific training through the International Association of Neurodiverse Christian Marriages, LLC. And so the list is small right now. There are other people doing good work, but those who are on our page just means they've been through our training. We know that they have a relationship with Jesus Christ and a committed faith. that they have some sort of coaching or counseling or ministerial background training, and they have decided to become neurodiverse aware or autism aware. So we want to make you aware of that, because often we're full. Our calendars are full. Also, because of that, we really started this last year doing some group coaching. So we'll kind of talk about some of the groups we're doing now, and we'll launch into it. So we'll kind of give an example. What groups are you running right now?
So right now it's for, I think the title is newly diagnosed, but is generally someone new to the world of autism for men. This is a subject that's been brought up, probably identify and might or might not have a official diagnosis, but it's something that is in the world right now, but it's new to me.
Right. And so Dan is doing that with a group of about 5 or 6 guys. And then I'm doing one for women who also, it's newly, the diagnosis or exploring is new. What are expectations? What are realistic expectations? What might change? What might not change? And so we're doing that separately, though, because we find men and women separately. You feel like you can talk about things a little bit differently. Then a second group that I've got going on is maybe people have been doing this work for a really long time. Maybe they've been in counseling for decades. Maybe they even have a neurodiverse aware counselor, but things haven't changed for a number of reasons. And so we're learning to accept that. And that's one of the stages of grief, is acceptance where things are, acceptance that things might not change. And finding my security and self-worth in the Lord and not in my marriage. So that's 2 groups that I'm running right now. And are you kind of running like a meetup?
I got a meetup from the group from the spring. So it's just to keep the crowd together. We had 16 of us over the spring, and this is just an opportunity to stay in contact.
Right. And then some of the coaches that we have coached, they have groups going on as well. So what I would invite you to do is, our groups really do fill quickly, because if you think of a counseling hour right now is $150 an hour, a group session might be $50 or $75 a session. So that is less expensive. You have an hour and a half time where it's not just you and one-on-one with a coach, but hearing from other people who are in similar situations, and maybe offering strategies or asking questions. And so maybe a question you wanted to ask, but you didn't think of it until someone asked it. So there's a huge benefit of a group aspect. It creates group identity, which is really important if you're following us with the Wilder stuff, and ability to hold each other accountable, and healthy correction. We do not run vent, bash your spouse groups. That is not what we're about. So go to our website and go to group coaching. You'll see that some of those are already full or they're already running, but we do have some going in the fall. And so we'll keep going to group coaching and seeing what all of our coaches are offering, but we can talk about what we know for sure is coming, or at least what has been committed to. And one of the ones that Dan and I talk about a lot is emotionally healthy relationships. And you've heard us talk about the day by day devotional book that goes with emotionally healthy relationships. That is going to be offered by our coaches, Jeremy and Charity Rochford, and they're going to have some mentor couples helping them. This actually is a free course. All right. So it's going to fill quickly. It will usually have anywhere from 26 to 35 couples, and it will fill quickly. And we give first preference to those who are working with us or working with some of the coaches. So if you're interested, you should jump on that wait list.
If you've done it again, it's probably good.
If you've done it one time, doing it 2 and 3 times. I mean, even when you take the course, the Scazzeros say it is best to take this 3 times before it
I saw on their website, they're refreshing their material in September.
Oh, that will be great. Because some of their role plays are a little cheesy, but it's still good material, a little bit of cheesy role play, but it's great. So please, 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 if you're working with one of us, we're going to suggest that you take it. But if you're a listener and you've never done it before, and you really want to work on your communication and really want to learn some scripts and dialogues, please go to group coaching, scroll down and find EHR, or emotionally healthy relationships. Which one are you going to be doing in the fall?
Escaping enemy mode.
All right. You've heard that.
Keeping
Dr.
that
Wilder.
groove on Jim Wilder.
Yep. We both are fans of Wilder. I'm also doing one. We're doing them separate. So he's doing one for men. I'm doing one for women, because sometimes spouses don't want to do this together, and we didn't want to limit your ability to do it because your spouse didn't want
There's
to.
a camaraderie in the group. I think most of the guys, when they signed up, would not have said that they enjoyed being in the group. And I think most of them on the other side of it say they do.
Yeah. So we have found doing more men and women groups. So a couple of reasons: camaraderie, group identity, feeling a little bit more free amongst guys to talk about things. Women feel a little bit more freer around the women to talk about things. But with escaping enemy mode, or is your marriage in enemy mode, you can do that as a wife without your husband being present. You can do that as a husband without your wife being present, or both of you can choose to take it and be in separate groups, and you're doing the same book or same course, but in separate spaces. I'm doing another one based on Jerry Scazzaro, which is Emotionally Healthy Woman. And that will be for neurotypical spouses. We're going to be combining two books, Emotionally Healthy Woman, 8 Things You Need to Quit. And one of them is over functioning. So we want to talk about that. And I'll be combining with a book called I Hurt, which is a kind of cognitive behavior therapy, thought replacement, changing our expectations and beliefs to help change your mood and attitude. We know those are definitely happening. We also know that our coaches, Iris Knapp and her co-leader, Kathy Young, they will be having some offerings for those of you who may be separated, separating, about to separate, divorcing, or divorced, specifically from a neurodiverse relationship. And that neurodiversity might be ADHD, autism, or something else. So it's very broad, but it was a very complex situation. So check hers out. We mentioned Jeremy. Sometimes Jeremy and Charity will have parenting ones because many of our couples also have children on the spectrum and need special needs coaching and support. So check that out. Jeremy might do one for dads. They might be doing one for couples together as parents. And I feel like I've forgotten someone, Barbara Grant. She has one for neurotypical men married to neurodivergent women. And so you can also find that on our webpage if you are the neurotypical spouse and you are male. That's a group she's really wanting to seek out and minister to. And then she usually runs 2 groups for neurotypical wives, and that changes from season to season. So please go to our site and check those things out. Also, we don't talk about this a lot, but we also have a new blog every Sunday. There's a new blog. Our goal is, we know that not everybody can afford coaching and counseling right now. So we're hoping maybe the podcast is something that's helping you. The blog, maybe that's something that helps you. Group coaching, and so lower level, less financial commitment, into some sort of help. And then individual coaching or counseling, that's kind of, the more expensive route. And then you can combine all of those with what you want to do. So that leads us to a book that we're writing. You probably heard us talking about Neurodiverse Christian Couples book, but we decided to back up and redo a book that I did in 2015 called Confessions of a Christian Counselor, but we are redoing it from a family perspective and not just my perspective. So we are hoping that will be launched and published this year if all things go well. Spoiler alert, Stephanie Holmes has written all of her portions. So 3 other family members still need to write.
Yeah, I need to talk to them. Yeah. I need to go get them.
Yeah. So it's writing a book with 4 people with various neurotype profiles.
I'm neuroplastic.
Yeah, well, you are more than some. I give you credit for that. So those things are coming up.
Logically friendly.
No, not always. No. All right, come back. All right, so we want to invite you to these other resources, also our courses. Go to the website. There are courses for couples, courses for professionals, one's aimed at family and parenting, and one aimed at your marriage. Did I forget anything on the site? Did I get it all?
I think that's everything.
Okay.
I think I'll say this. I think on the site, what's not there yet, and what I will encourage to get there, is a lot of our book resources.
Mm-hmm.
When somebody says, hey, what's a book you recommend, like this one, okay, or this June one, this is why it's there, and this is the book, and this is why it's there. This is what you could use from.
So thank you for bringing that up. We do want to get a resource list up, but until that is up, if you go to my YouTube page, the Dr. Stephanie C. Holmes, I have made 2 YouTubes, quote, secular resources like Gottman, or Christian resources like June Hunt. So I've made 2 15-minute videos And I brought all my books down off the shelves and set them right here and talked through each one of them, why we like them, why we recommend them, what it might be interesting for. So in the meantime, Dan is going to hold me accountable to get the resources page up. But I think
just transcribe that.
Yeah, I could send that to Go Transcript. Okay, all right, easy. Thank you. Or Chatbot can help me too. Chatbot GPT is becoming my friend. I call him Chatbot. He's my friend, the Chatbot. Okay.
You can ask him to give himself a name.
Okay, I'm going to do that. I'm going to ask Chattybot.
I want to call you something. What can I call you? Just
okay,
we'll play pretend.
We're messing around. We're writing some blogs now with Chatbot. Chatbot is doing some theme work in our book. Not Maurice. Okay, so as we usually end.
We're all done.
No, we don't say that. Jeremiah 29:11.
Hope for your future.
Yes, there we go. So there's hope for your future, and you're not alone on your journey.